Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Ellis. There is a nutrition revolution going on right now, and you'll want to join this. Got to break the ties to the old establishment way of thinking and embrace the low carbohydrate diet. And we're going to go way beyond the issue of weight control. That's the old news. Low carb diet for just weight control. We're talking about low carb diet for health. Primarily for health. Got to restrict your exposure to blood sugar, glucose, and not eat it along with fat. Fat needs to be an important part of this new dietary mantra. So people often ask me, what's my take on the low carb diet? How do I embrace it? Well, I start with the basics that we have to look at what low carb means in respect to the total number of calories we consume in a day. So let's assume, for example, that we're going to consume 2,500 calories a day. Then the amount of carbohydrate that you eat should be a percentage of those calories. Now, each gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories in it. So if we wanted to say that the basic fundamental cutoff point where carbohydrate restriction begins to make an effect on your body is when the carbs are reduced to about 25% of your total calorie intake. 25% of your total calorie intake. Now, that's just the starting point. Personally, I think it's more effective to go down to where carbs represent maybe 10 to 15% of your total calorie intake. We have no idea if going to zero makes any significant difference. My sense is that it might, but who would do it and why bother? It's not necessary. Now, what you don't want to do is follow the most popular form of low-carb diet, which is Dr. Atkins' version. That has serious, serious flaws to it, particularly the initial stage, which is called the induction phase, in which he just immediately cuts your carbs back to 20 grams a day. You're going to feel like a basket case when you do that. And the reason for that is that you can't process all the fat and the ketones that the body is now producing. You don't have the enzymes in your tissues to do that. So you just become fuel deficient because you've immediately removed the primary fuel that you're used to burning, which was the carbohydrates. And you don't have the metabolic machinery now to handle the increased amount of fat. So you've got to do this thing more slowly, and I spell that out, but I'd take at least several weeks. First week, I wouldn't do anything. I would just get a carbohydrate book and begin to learn the grams of carbs in the types of foods that you typically eat or that you will eat, and don't change anything, and then get an idea of how many grams of carbohydrate you are eating each day. For most people, it's between 200 and 300 grams a day in our high-carb society. So get a handle on that, and then in the second week you can cut down to maybe 150 grams and do that for a week, and then gradually reduce it to 125, then 100. Typical low-carb diet is going to be between 60 and 80 grams a day. Anybody can do that. That's not hard. You get used to that in a matter of a couple of weeks. So that's the effective way, the right way to do the low-carb diet, and that way you won't have problems with the lack of fuel in your system. And the numbers don't need to be absolute. People often ask me, how many grams of protein should I get? How many grams of fat? Certainly cut the grams of carbs down, and then you don't want to make this a high protein diet. You do not want to do a high protein. You want a higher fat content and a reasonable level of protein. Too many people go into this thing and they start thinking, okay, I'm going to do a carbohydrate restricted diet, but gee, I know fat is going to cause me heart disease and other things, none of which is true. But then they fear fat, and they actually restrict the carbs and they restrict the fat and go on a high protein diet. And you're going to be hungry. You will be hungry on that because the body is going to aggressively convert some of that protein into carbohydrate. And it's the fat that satisfies you. So it's important that the concentration of fat be reasonably higher. You can get this in any number of ways, from fatty cuts of meat, that's what I prefer, high fat percentage hamburger, heavy whipping cream. I drink a lot of that. Fatty steaks, and I don't trim the fat, I eat the fat. So that's really the right way to do this. And you need to adapt to this thing. You need to take your time and move into this thing gradually so your body and your mind can adapt to this way of eating, to this lifestyle. Now, the easiest thing for me to cut out certain foods, particularly a lot of carbohydrates, was to keep in mind what I've learned about the dangers of glucose and the dangers of insulin. So I always think about, I don't want that stuff floating around in my body. I don't want glucose in my blood. So that makes it easy for me to cut things out because I know the impact of what this glucose is going to do to my body. It's going to be the source of glycated proteins, which are going to lead to rapid aging and degenerative diseases and feeling lousy. And the insulin is bad news too, because that causes problems. And the most important part of your body's cells is something called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria produce the energy for your body. And they can get all mucked up by glucose and by insulin. And the body has a mechanism in place where it can keep these things clean and healthy and degrade the bad ones and make new ones. And insulin will shorten that process. It will weaken it. It weakens the enzymes that process the bad mitochondria. And this is a way to rapidly age. So that's why I'm talking about the importance of a carbohydrate-restricted diet in respect to health. So we've got to forget about the establishment, the politicians, the health agencies. They do not know what they're talking about. They have no idea about any of this stuff, and they're going to continue to promote the idea that it is fat and cholesterol that is the cause of our health problems. And they're simply wrong. That era is over. Now, how long is it going to take to die? I think a long while, because there's going to be a great deal of resistance to that idea, and people are just have been pounded into submission with the idea that fat and cholesterol are really bad for you, and it's going to be a difficult challenge. So that's why you are going to have to take it upon yourself and let go of these outdated ideas, because they're outdated, they were never correct, but now we know what's true. That's why I say a new era, a revolution in nutrition is taking place right now. And it's important to each and every one of us that we use this new nutritional information to help us improve our own health and our own longevity and our feelings and our mind and the way we think and our energy levels, because these are all the benefits you're going to derive when you do this thing correctly. So that's what we need to do, and that's how I recommend we do it. You don't want to micromanage this thing too much and worry about, when I see people talking, well, tell me exactly what percent of carbohydrate I should eat, or percent of protein, or percent of fat. Don't make it that difficult on yourself. Just get to the threshold levels that I've described, and then take it from there, and you'll be fine. Anywhere in between is a good way to go, and you'll get used to it, and it will work for you, and you'll derive a tremendous amount of benefit from it beyond the issue of weight control. Now, you have to know how, if you want to use this for weight control, it's just a part of the overall weight control formula. You have to know the other pieces too, and the importance of calories if you want to succeed at the weight control game. And I describe that in detail in my writings, and that'll be a good way for you to go. So that's my take on the low-carb diet, how to do it right, what to avoid, what pitfalls to avoid. The main one, of course, is don't follow the Dr. Atkins formula, because that's just filled with flaws and misinformation. It was good in its day, but its day has come and gone, and he's actually helped to entrench the establishment more so in their belief about the dangers that attend low-carb eating. because much of the misinformation that he promoted. But I'm not promoting misinformation. I'm promoting the facts because I understand the facts and I know how this whole thing works. I've written the book on it. I am the expert on it, and I understand it, and I want to lead this movement into a changing dietary regimen. So if you just keep following my work and following my videos, we'll just keep pounding away at this idea and help change the way things are. I'm Dr. Greg Ellis.